At the company holiday party, I cheerfully told my colleague Sarah, "I can't wait for the family reunion tomorrow." My mom froze on the other end of the phone. What she said next shattered everything I thought I knew about my place in this family. For 18 months, I'd been sending $200 every single month back home to Ohio, covering their electric bills, rent, and groceries like clockwork. I thought I was the golden daughter, the backbone holding our family together. But when Mom stammered, "Oh, honey, the reunion was yesterday," I realized they'd used my money, but forgotten I even existed. That night, I decided Madison the ATM was officially out of service. The Meridian Marketing holiday party was in full swing when I pulled out my phone to show Sarah the family photos I'd been carrying around like trophies. There was Dad teaching my nephew how to fish, Mom in her favorite floral dress baking Christmas cookies, and my brother Derek with his new girlfriend at last year's reunion. "Look at this," I said, swiping through the pictures with genuine pride. "This is why I work those 60-hour weeks. This is why I haven't taken a real vacation in 2 years. Everything I do is for them." Sarah smiled politely, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "That's really sweet, Madison, but when was the last time you did something just for yourself?" I laughed it off, the way I always did when people questioned my priorities. "Family comes first," I said, echoing the phrase that had been drilled into me since childhood. Besides, I love being able to help them. Dad's been struggling since the factory downsized, and Mom's arthritis makes it hard for her to work full-time. Derek's still figuring things out after college. They need me. What I didn't mention was how proud it made me feel when Mom would text things like, "You're such a blessing, sweetheart," after I'd transferred money for the electric bill, or how Dad would call me his little success story when he'd brag to neighbors about his daughter who made it big in California. For the first time in my life, I felt valuable, needed, essential to my family's happiness. The party was winding down when Sarah asked the question that would change everything. "So when exactly is this family reunion you've been talking about?" I checked my phone automatically, expecting to see the usual flurry of group chat messages about who was bringing what dish, what time everyone should arrive, and whether Uncle Bob would remember to pick up the folding chairs. Instead, I found silence. The family group chat, usually buzzing with activity, hadn't had a new message since Tuesday. "Tomorrow," I said, but for the first time, uncertainty crept into my voice. "It's definitely tomorrow, December 20th. I sent Mom the money for groceries and decorations 3 weeks ago." Sarah nodded, but I could tell she'd picked up on my hesitation. As we gathered our coats and headed to the parking garage, I kept checking my phone, waiting for those familiar message bubbles to appear. The drive home to my apartment in West Hollywood felt longer than usual. Christmas lights blurred past my windows as I sat at red lights, my mind racing through the past few weeks. Had Mom mentioned a date change? Had Derek said anything about rescheduling? I tried to remember our last phone conversation, but all I could recall was Mom thanking me for the reunion contribution and assuring me that everything was handled. By the time I reached my apartment, the knot in my stomach had grown too large to ignore. I scrolled through our text history one more time before finally hitting Mom's contact. The phone rang 6 times before she answered, and I could immediately tell something was off. Her voice had that high, nervous quality she got when she was hiding something, and I could hear what sounded like Derek laughing in the background. "Hi, honey," she said, but there was an edge to her cheerfulness that made my blood run cold. "How was your party?" In the background, I heard Dad's voice saying something about leftover turkey, and my nephew asking if he could have another piece of pie. My heart stopped. Turkey? Pie? Those weren't everyday foods in my parents' house. "Mom," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "what's going on over there? It sounds like you're having some kind of celebration." There was a pause that lasted exactly 4 seconds too long, 4 seconds during which I could hear my family laughing and chatting in the background while my mother scrambled for an explanation. "Oh, that?" she said with forced lightness. "We just decided to have a little early Christmas dinner. You know how your father loves his turkey." But even as she spoke, I could hear Derek in the background saying something about best reunion ever, and Aunt Linda's distinctive laugh echoing from what sounded like a crowded room. Mom, I said again, and this time I couldn't keep the suspicion out of my voice. Be honest with me. What's really happening? The background noise suddenly got quieter, like someone had closed a door or moved to another room. Madison, sweetheart, she began, and I knew with horrible certainty what was coming next. Oh, honey, the reunion was yesterday. The words hit me like a physical blow. Yesterday. The family reunion I'd been looking forward to for months. The event I'd helped fund with my hard-earned money had happened yesterday while I was working late on the Henderson account presentation. What do you mean it was yesterday? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We planned this for December 20th. I have it in my calendar. I took tomorrow off work. Mom's explanation came in a rush of excuses that didn't quite add up. They'd tried to call, she claimed, but I was always so busy with work. Derek had mentioned that maybe I wouldn't be able to make it anyway, given my demanding schedule. The date had been moved up because Aunt Linda could only get time off on the 19th instead of the 20th. But Mom, I said, feeling like I was drowning, I sent you $500 specifically for the reunion. I've been planning this for months. I bought a plane ticket. There was another pause, shorter this time, before she said the words that would haunt me for weeks. Well, you did say you might not make it anyway because of your career. I had never said that. Not once. I'd been talking about this reunion nonstop for months, counting down the days, making plans for what dishes I'd contribute and which cousins I was most excited to see. The career excuse was something they'd invented to justify excluding me, and the worst part was that they'd used my own money to fund the celebration I wasn't invited to attend. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Then I did what any millennial would do in a crisis. I checked Instagram. The first post I saw was from Uncle Bob, posted 3 hours ago. It showed him carving a massive turkey with the caption, "Best family reunion ever, so grateful for these beautiful faces." I scrolled down with growing horror as the evidence of my exclusion mounted. Cousin Jenny had posted a group photo of at least 20 family members gathered around my parents' dining room table, everyone laughing and holding up glasses of what looked like the good wine I'd helped pay for. "Missing these faces already. Can't wait for next year," she'd written. Next year. As if this had been planned all along. Derek had shared a video of him and Dad playing guitar together on the back porch, with the caption, "Nothing beats family time. Thanks, Mom, for organizing everything perfectly." Thanks, Mom, for organizing everything perfectly. With my money, without me. But it was Mom's post that broke me completely. She'd uploaded a photo of herself surrounded by grandchildren, beaming at the camera with genuine happiness, and written, "So grateful for family who show up when it matters most. Love doesn't require words, just presence." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Love doesn't require words, just presence. Posted by the woman who'd taken my financial presence for granted while excluding my actual presence entirely. I screenshot every single post before heading upstairs to my apartment, though I'm not sure why. Maybe I needed proof that this had really happened. Maybe I wanted evidence for the confrontation I knew was coming. Or maybe I just needed to document the moment my entire understanding of my family dynamics crumbled. My apartment felt different when I walked in that night. The framed family photos that usually made me feel connected to something bigger now looked like evidence of my own delusion. The stack of money transfer receipts on my desk, which I'd kept as a record of my contributions, now felt like documentation of my exploitation. For 18 months, I'd been systematically draining my own bank account to fund a family who'd apparently been planning gatherings without me. I spread the receipts out on my coffee table and started calculating. January through December of the previous year, $14,400. January through November of this year, $13,200. Plus the extra reunion contribution, $500. In total, I'd sent my family $28,100 over 18 months. $28,000 that could have gone toward a down payment on a house, a dream vacation to Europe, or even just building an emergency fund that might have given me some security. Instead, I'd been living paycheck to paycheck in one of the most expensive cities in America, eating ramen noodles for dinner and canceling streaming subscriptions to save money, all while my family used my contributions to fund gatherings I wasn't even invited to attend. The mathematics of my betrayal were written out in black and white, and the numbers didn't lie. That's when I called Derek. If Mom was going to gaslight me, maybe my brother would give me a straight answer. He picked up on the second ring, and I could tell he was still at the family gathering by the background noise. "Hey, sis," he said, and I could hear the slight slur in his voice that meant he'd been enjoying the wine I'd helped pay for. "How's the big city treating you?" "Oh, how could you not invite me to the reunion, Derek?" I asked, skipping any pretense of small talk. There was a pause, and then he laughed. Actually laughed, as if my hurt was amusing. "Mom said you were too busy with your LA life to come anyway. Besides, you never really fit in with the rest of us anymore." You never really fit in with the rest of us anymore. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me harder than anything Mom had said. This wasn't about scheduling conflicts or miscommunication. This was about my family actively choosing to exclude me while continuing to accept my financial support. They wanted my money, but they didn't want me. "Derek, I've been sending money home for a year and a half," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been supporting this family financially while sacrificing my own financial security. How can you say I don't fit in?" His response was swift and cutting. "Nobody asked you to send money, Madison. That was your choice. And just because you pay for stuff doesn't mean you get to control our family events." The gaslighting was masterful in its simplicity. By framing my financial contributions as controlling behavior rather than generous support, he'd managed to make me the villain in my own story of betrayal. According to Derek's logic, I was the problem for expecting inclusion after 18 months of financial sacrifice. After Derek hung up on me, actually hung up like we were teenagers having a fight, I tried calling Dad, straight to voicemail. I tried texting him directly, pouring out my hurt and confusion in a long message that I spent 20 minutes crafting and recrafting. His response came 6 hours later. "Don't be so dramatic, Madison. Family is complicated. Don't be so dramatic." Those 4 words encapsulated everything wrong with my family's dynamic. My legitimate hurt at being excluded from a gathering I'd helped fund was dismissed as drama. My financial contributions were taken for granted, but my emotional needs were treated as an inconvenience. The message was clear. I was valuable as long as I was useful, but the moment I expressed any needs of my own, I became a problem to be managed rather than a person to be loved. That night, I sat on my couch surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal. Bank statements, Instagram screenshots, text message histories that told the story of 18 months of one-sided generosity. I'd been so focused on being the daughter who could provide for everyone that I'd failed to notice they'd already written me out of the family story. I was a supporting character in my own family's narrative, valued for my financial contributions, but not missed when I wasn't physically present. The worst part wasn't the money, though $28,000 was nothing to sneeze at. The worst part was the realization that I'd been performing love for an audience that had already left the theater. Every sacrifice I'd made, every overtime hour I'd worked to ensure I could send money home, every time I'd chosen their needs over my own, none of it had earned me a place at their table when it mattered most. As I finally tried to sleep that night, I kept replaying Derek's words. "You never really fit in with the rest of us anymore." The truth was, I'd been trying so hard to fit in that I'd lost track of who I was outside of my role as the family ATM. I'd defined myself entirely by my ability to provide for them, and when that provision became expected rather than appreciated, I'd become invisible even to myself. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Mom and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. Apparently, the electric company had sent a disconnect notice and she'd automatically assumed I'd handle it like I always did. "Sweetie, can you take care of the electric bill? They're threatening to shut it off today and we have all the Christmas leftovers in the fridge." The casual expectation that I'd continue funding their lifestyle after they'd excluded me from their celebration was staggering in its audacity. For the first time in 18 months, I didn't immediately open my banking app to send a transfer. Instead, I stared at the text message, really seeing it for what it was. Not a request from a grateful family member, but a demand from someone who'd grown accustomed to using me as their personal financial safety net. They'd eaten the food I'd paid for at a celebration I wasn't invited to, and now they expected me to clean up the aftermath without question or complaint. That's when I realized that Madison the ATM was officially out of service. I stared at Mom's text about the electric bill for 3 hours before I finally understood what Sarah had been trying to tell me at the holiday party. This wasn't love. Love doesn't come with automatic payment expectations. Love doesn't exclude you from family gatherings while expecting you to fund them. That New Year's Eve, instead of flying home like I'd planned, I stayed in LA and had the most honest conversation of my life with my friend Sarah over wine and Chinese takeout. "Madison, I need to show you something," Sarah said, pulling up an article on her phone. "I've been researching since you told me what happened." The headline read, "Financial Abuse in Families When Love Becomes Transactional." As I read through the article, I felt like someone was describing my life back to me. Golden children turned ATMs. Financial exploitation disguised as family loyalty. The guilt manipulation cycle that keeps adult children trapped in unhealthy financial relationships. The article explained how some families identify the most empathetic, successful child and systematically condition them to believe their worth is tied to their ability to provide. They use guilt, shame, and intermittent positive reinforcement to maintain the financial flow while slowly eroding the child's sense of self-worth and boundaries. It was like reading my own psychological profile written by a stranger. "Sarah," I whispered, looking up from her phone. "This is exactly what happened to me. They didn't forget to invite me to the reunion. They chose not to invite me because they've never seen me as a person. They only see me as a resource." That night, I made my first therapy appointment in 5 years. Dr. Martinez had an opening the following Tuesday, and I spent the weekend preparing for a conversation I'd been avoiding my entire adult life. Dr. Martinez's office felt like a safe haven from the chaos in my head. She was a small woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of calm presence that made you want to tell her your deepest secrets. "Madison," she said after I'd spent 40 minutes explaining the reunion situation, "I want you to consider something that might be difficult to hear. What if this pattern of financial giving wasn't actually about love, but about your desperate attempt to purchase the acceptance you never received freely?" The question hit me like a sledgehammer. For 18 months, I'd been telling myself that sending money home was an act of love, but Dr. Martinez was suggesting it was actually an act of desperation. "Think about it," she continued. "When did you feel most valued by your family? Was it during emotional conversations, shared experiences, or moments of vulnerability? Or was it when you solved their financial problems?" I knew the answer immediately. The moments I felt most loved were always transactional. When Dad called me his little success story after I'd covered the rent, when Mom texted "You're such a blessing" after I'd handled the electric bill, when Derek actually returned my calls because he needed help with his student loan payment. I'd been buying affection at a premium price, and my family had been happy to sell it to me. "Dr. Martinez," I said, feeling pieces of my identity shifting and clicking into place. "I think I've been afraid that if I stop giving them money, they'll stop loving me. But the truth is, if they only love me when I'm useful to them, then they never loved me at all." She nodded encouragingly. "That's a profound realization, Madison. Now the question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into research the way I'd once thrown myself into work. I read everything I could find about family financial boundaries, emotional manipulation, and recovering from dysfunctional family dynamics. I learned about flying monkeys, family members who pressure you to return to old patterns. I discovered the concept of chosen family, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than blood relations. Most importantly, I learned that saying no to financial requests wasn't selfish. It was necessary for my psychological survival. I also did something I'd never done before. I calculated exactly how much my family's financial dependence was costing me. Beyond the $2,100 I'd sent over 18 months, there were the opportunities I'd missed because I was always financially stretched. The promotion I'd turned down because it required relocation and I couldn't abandon my family. The emergency fund I'd never built because every spare dollar went home. The relationship that ended because I was too stressed about money to be emotionally available. The true cost of being my family's ATM wasn't just the money I'd sent. It was the life I'd never allowed myself to live. At 28 years old, I was living like a college student, subsisting on ramen and store-brand groceries while my family enjoyed the financial security I'd provided but never experienced myself. I was funding their American dream while sacrificing my own. Dr. Martinez helped me draft what she called a boundary communication. It wasn't angry or accusatory, it was simply honest. Effective immediately, I'm discontinuing regular financial support for the family. I've realized that our relationships have become too focused on money, and I'd like to rebuild them based on genuine emotional connection instead. I'm available for conversations, shared experiences, and mutual support, but I'm no longer able to serve as the family's financial safety net. The message was 3 sentences long and took me 4 hours to write. I rewrote it 17 times, removing any language that could be interpreted as blame while still being crystal clear about my boundaries. Finally, at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in January, I hit send on the family group chat. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started buzzing within minutes. Mom called first, her voice high and panicked. "Madison, what do you mean you're discontinuing support? We're family. Your father's heart condition means he can't work full-time, and you know Derek is still finding his footing. How could you abandon us when we need you most?" The guilt was thick and immediate, designed to trigger every protective instinct I'd developed over the years. But Dr. Martinez had warned me this would happen. "They're going to use every emotional weapon in their arsenal," she'd said. "They'll bring up Dad's health, Derek's struggles, your moral obligations as a daughter. Remember that none of those things obligate you to financial sacrifice, especially not from a family that excluded you from their celebration." "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm establishing healthy boundaries. If you want to have a relationship with me based on love and mutual respect, I'm absolutely open to that. But the financial arrangement we've had isn't sustainable or healthy for anyone involved." Mom's response was swift. "This is selfish, Madison. This isn't who we raised you to be." But that was exactly the problem. They'd raised me to believe that my value lay in my ability to solve their problems, not in my inherent worth as a person. They'd trained me to feel guilty for having needs of my own and to find my identity in their approval rather than my own self-respect. The person they'd raised me to be was someone who would sacrifice her own well-being indefinitely to maintain their comfort, and I was finally ready to admit that person needed to evolve. Derek called next, and his approach was different but equally manipulative. "Madison, I get that you're upset about the reunion thing, but you can't punish the whole family because of one miscommunication. Dad's really stressed about the bills, and you know stress is bad for his heart. Mom's been crying all afternoon. Is proving a point really worth putting our parents through this?" The framing was masterful. My boundary setting was now punishment. Their exclusion of me was merely a miscommunication, and any consequences of their financial irresponsibility were my fault for refusing to enable them. Derek had always been skilled at emotional manipulation, but for the first time, I could see the tactics clearly instead of being swept away by them. "Derek," I said, "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm making a healthy choice for my own financial and emotional well-being. If Dad is stressed about bills, perhaps the family can work together to create a budget and find solutions that don't depend on my income." His response revealed the truth of our family dynamic. "But Madison, we've always been able to count on you. Why are you changing the rules now?" "We've always been able to count on you. Not we love you or we value you or we appreciate you, but we've always been able to count on you. Like a reliable appliance or a steady paycheck." The language was unconsciously honest. I was a resource they'd grown accustomed to using, not a person they'd learned to love. The flying monkeys arrived within hours. Aunt Linda called to tell me I was being ungrateful, and that family sticks together through thick and thin. Uncle Bob sent a long text about how disappointed he was in my selfish behavior. Cousin Jenny posted a passive-aggressive Facebook status about people who forget where they came from. The family network that had never reached out to support me emotionally was now fully mobilized to pressure me financially. But the most revealing response came from Dad himself. He left a voicemail that was only 30 seconds long. "Madison, I'm not sure what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't like you. Your mother is very upset, and frankly, so am I. We raised you better than this. Call us when you're ready to be reasonable. Your mother is very upset, and frankly, so am I. Not, we miss you, or we want to work this out, or we love you regardless. Just disappointment that their financial arrangement had been disrupted." The voicemail confirmed everything Dr. Martinez had helped me understand. They weren't upset about losing their daughter's presence in their lives. They were upset about losing their daughter's payments. Over the next few weeks, the pressure campaign intensified. Mom would text photos of Dad looking tired and stressed, with captions like, "Your father's been so worried since you stopped helping us." Derek sent me screenshots of overdue bill notices, as if documenting their financial struggles would guilt me into resuming payments. The family group chat, which had been silent when I was funding their celebrations, suddenly became very active with discussions about family loyalty and Christian values. But something interesting began to happen. As my family's financial pressure mounted and their manipulative tactics became more obvious, I started feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. My bank account, which had been constantly drained, began to build a small cushion. I bought groceries without checking my balance first. I went out to dinner with Sarah without calculating how much the meal would cost. For the first time in 18 months, I felt financially secure. More importantly, I started redirecting the energy I'd been pouring into my family's problems toward my own life. I updated my resume and applied for the senior marketing position I'd been too financially stressed to consider. I started therapy twice a week instead of once. I signed up for a pottery class I'd been wanting to take for months but couldn't afford. Slowly, I began to remember who Madison was when she wasn't defined by her ability to solve other people's problems. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after I'd set my boundaries. Mom called in tears, not about money for once, but about Derek. "Madison, your brother got arrested for drunk driving last night. He's been drinking more and more since Christmas. I don't know what to do." For the first time in months, she was calling me not as an ATM, but as her daughter. "Mom," I said gently, "that sounds really scary and overwhelming. Have you looked into local AA meetings for Derek, or family counseling to help you all process what's been happening?" It felt strange to offer emotional support instead of financial solutions, but it also felt more authentic than anything I'd done in months. There was a long pause before Mom said something that shocked me. "Madison, I think we've been asking the wrong things of you. Your father and I have been talking, and we realize we've been treating you like our personal bank instead of our daughter. Derek getting arrested made us realize we've all been avoiding our problems instead of solving them." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first acknowledgement I'd received that the family dynamic had been unhealthy. "Mom," I said, feeling tears in my eyes, "I would love to have a real relationship with you, one where we talk about feelings and experiences, not just bills and emergencies. One where I'm valued for who I am, not what I can provide." The conversation that followed was the most honest one we'd had in years. Mom admitted that she and Dad had become dependent on my financial contributions and had stopped trying to solve their own problems. She acknowledged that excluding me from the reunion while expecting me to fund it had been thoughtless and hurtful. She didn't use the word wrong, but it was more accountability than I'd ever received from her. "Oh, your father got a part-time job at the hardware store," she told me. "And Derek is moving back home to help with expenses while he gets his life together. We're learning to manage our own finances instead of relying on you. It's been hard, but maybe that's what we needed." As spring arrived, something beautiful began to happen. Without the constant financial drain and emotional manipulation, I had space to build the life I'd always wanted. The senior marketing position came through, along with a 30% salary increase. I started dating someone I'd met at the pottery class, a teacher named Alex who valued my sense of humor and intelligence rather than my earning potential. Most surprisingly, my relationship with my family began to improve. Without money complicating every interaction, we started having actual conversations. Mom called to ask about my pottery class and tell me about her garden. Dad sent me photos of projects he was working on at his new job. Derek, who was attending AA meetings and therapy, actually apologized for his role in the reunion exclusion. "Madison," he said during one of our rare phone calls, "I need you to know that what we did at Christmas was wrong. We took advantage of your generosity and treated you like you didn't matter. I was drinking too much and dealing with my own problems by making you the villain, but the truth is, you've been the most responsible person in this family for years." The apology meant more than any amount of gratitude for financial help ever had. For the first time, Derek was seeing me as a person with feelings rather than a problem to be managed or a resource to be used. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was progress. By summer, I'd built something I'd never had before, a chosen family of people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. Sarah and I took a vacation to Italy, my first real vacation in 3 years. Alex and I moved in together, splitting expenses fairly and supporting each other's dreams. I joined a support group for adult children of financially manipulative families, where I met people who understood my experience and celebrated my growth. The most healing part was discovering that I could help my biological family without sacrificing myself. When Mom needed surgery for her arthritis, I sent flowers and visited for a weekend, offering emotional support instead of a blank check. When Derek completed 6 months of sobriety, I drove home to attend his AA ceremony. When Dad's birthday came around, I sent a heartfelt card and called to share memories, not money. These interactions felt completely different from our old dynamic. Instead of feeling drained and resentful after family contact, I felt energized and connected. They were learning to see me as Madison the person rather than Madison the ATM, and I was learning to see them as flawed human beings rather than bottomless pits of need. The final piece of healing came when I decided to share my story. I wrote a blog post about family financial boundaries that went viral, reaching thousands of people who recognized their own experiences in my words. The responses poured in from adult children who'd been funding parents' lifestyles while sacrificing their own well-being, siblings who'd been cast as the responsible one while others got to be carefree, and people who'd never realized that financial manipulation could be just as damaging as other forms of family dysfunction. "Your story gave me permission to say no," one woman wrote. "I've been supporting my brother's family for 4 years while my own kids went without new clothes. Today, I set boundaries for the first time." Another person shared, "I thought I was being selfish for wanting my family to appreciate me for more than my paycheck. Thank you for showing me that love shouldn't come with automatic payment expectations." Reading these responses, I realized that my painful experience with family financial boundaries hadn't just healed me. It had equipped me to help others recognize and break free from similar patterns. The money I'd lost funding my family's lifestyle had been an expensive education in the difference between love and financial manipulation, but it was an education that allowed me to guide others toward healthier relationships. A year after that devastating December phone call, I returned to Ohio for Christmas, but this time I stayed in a hotel instead of at my parents' house. I brought thoughtful gifts instead of cash. I participated in family activities as Madison, the daughter and sister, not Madison, the financial savior. The reunion I attended wasn't funded by my sacrifice, and my presence wasn't overshadowed by my usefulness. As I sat around my parents' table that Christmas Eve, sharing stories and laughing with my family, I realized something profound. This was what I'd been trying to buy with all those monthly payments. Not their financial security, but their genuine presence and attention. Not their gratitude for my contributions, but their acceptance of my authentic self. The love I'd thought I was purchasing had actually been available all along, but only when I stopped trying to earn it and started demanding it as my birthright. The woman who had once defined herself by her ability to solve everyone else's problems had learned to create a life where her own problems mattered too. The daughter who had once bought her place at the family table had learned to claim her seat through self-respect rather than sacrifice. And the ATM who had once dispensed money on demand had learned the most valuable lesson of all. True family doesn't cost a thing, but it's worth everything.